Well, howdy, y'all. This is Market Explainer, episode 48. We are America's #1 business news podcast. I, of course, am always Danny and joined by my co-host.
That's right. Taste it.
The big
taste
man.
It,
Before we jump into these stories, I want to tell you about our Patreon. Starting with episode 50, our full episode video will only be on Patreon for free. Encourage you to sign up. Being very transparent here.
We're still in negotiations about that free. I'm trying to make it cost something. Danny wants to give it to you free. I don't know about all that, but go ahead.
Well, screw me and my talks for trying to be a capitalist and trying to whatever. But the point is, you should go join our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Market Explainer. All of our clips will come out as usual. And the audio will come out in full and as clips in the 2 different streams as they have been for quite some time. And we encourage you to join wherever you listen to podcasts. The audio is actually surprisingly, to this man's surprise, is doing superbly well. So
it's because of my awesomeness. It's all right. You can admit it.
No. Of course, that is patreon.com/Market Explainer. We also have marketexplainer.com. You can learn about all of our sponsors, many of which I own, and very few of which he owns. And there's that.
Got to give Danny a bone somehow. That's all I'm saying.
So this first story we're going to explain to you, we're going to mansplain it to you, is YouTube's Q3 revenue ballooned 43% up to $72 billion. Which includes 50 million music subscribers and premium subscribers, of which I am one, which is why I don't have Spotify, because I have YouTube Premium, which used to be called YouTube Red, but it seemed a little easy. So they rebranded it to Premium. But the crazy part about this is it's getting really close to Netflix levels of revenue, which is wild.
Okay, so you have 2 different parts of this, all right? One, because the way, again, we're getting into stocks and the way public traded companies report things like sales data and stuff like that. So you have 2 different parts of this. You have the ad revenue, which we all know, right? The ads that you see on this YouTube video or anybody else's. And then you have subscription-based revenue, right? 2 completely different things. So both of these, and this article that Danny sent me actually tried to really, in a weird way, didn't do a very good job of explaining which is which and how it all grew. Because they have now found worldwide, they hit 50 million subscribers, right? On average, they have 2 different products. You have your, like you were talking about, your YouTube subscription model, and then you have a radio subscription model.
Well, the streaming music, YouTube music.
But they count those in one category, is the point. So when they say 50 million, they're combining the audio with the video as well, right?
So the way it works, for those who are unfamiliar, is I have YouTube Premium. I think it's $9 or $10 a month. And I don't get any ads on YouTube, and I get unlimited music streaming.
Right. So you can get music, or you can get music and the video, YouTube, which is the YouTube Premium, right? When you average those 2 together, I mean, I think yours is $12. The music is like $10 a month or whatever. But even if you just go with that bottom number, it doesn't take a mathematician to go 50 million times 10, add a 0. That's $500 million of revenue a month, right? Like that's, and then Well, and then you add that to the increase in ad revenue, right? Which is up 43% for this quarter alone. Right. Now you start talking, and this is where we get that magic number. Netflix last quarter, I think
7.48 billion versus YouTube 7 billion in Q2.
Exactly. So this is where the article is written about. These numbers get really close to another, but where Netflix doesn't have the ad revenue, they just have the subscription model, right? YouTube's combining these 2 things. The difference, though, I think that, again, people get because we get caught up in these numbers when we talk about market share and stuff like that.
Right.
Obviously, it's not just about the numbers. Netflix is
No.
obviously investing heavily into their own content, that kind of stuff. YouTube tried that and then discontinued it very quickly.
It didn't work. Yeah.
It didn't work at all, right? I think maybe at some point, if they get back into the game, maybe they can. So, from a truly just not value, but a money-making standpoint, they are close, right? Obviously, 7 billion, 7.5 billion. But from a futuristic planning standpoint,
Right.
they're not even on the same planet right now.
So here's the one thing that you have to, I mean, YouTube does not have to worry about content creation in the same manner. So there's a delta
Netflix,
here. Yeah. There's a $500 million delta here between their earnings. But if you look at it like from the perspective of Netflix has to spend a lot of money to create content because they got us hooked.
Or acquire
whatever it is.
Licensing it, however.
Yeah, and so like in the situation of YouTube Premium's, original series, a lot of them got purchased up by other streaming platforms, and they will continue. They'll live on over there. Like for instance, Cobra Kai was YouTube Premium first, right? And then it went to Netflix, and I freaking love that show. And when Netflix got it, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about it, I felt like a hipster. I was like, I used to see them down at the Vulcan Lounge. No one else liked them
before it was cool. I have not seen a single minute of that show, and I probably should. Man. But a lot of people love it, and it's on season 4 or 5 now on Netflix, right? So
it's coming.
It's obviously popular, right,
Super
and that
popular.
kind of thing. So it's one of those things. I'm glad that television, Netflix, these things have finally come to a place where, all right, you lose your home here for whatever reason. All of these others, really, in today's world, you have a real shot of getting picked up by a Netflix, by a Hulu, by a whatever, right?
So a great example of this would have been Manifest. It did 3 seasons on NBC.
Yep.
They, Netflix puts it on their platform. They buy it or they license the rights to it, and the most crazy thing happens. The show gets canceled because nobody watched it on NBC.
Mm-hmm.
We all watched it at home because there's literally nothing new coming out because of, El Tecate. So we end up, everybody watched it. It was top 10 on Netflix for many, many weeks. Netflix goes out, acquires it, says, we're going to do a final season, to close out the story. It's wild that that can happen. And that's not a story of just one show. That happens a lot. Because Netflix realizes that they have this kind of lean production model where they built the audience. They got the audience hooked on something that they licensed.
Yep.
And then they go buy it when somebody else doesn't want it. If a show gets canceled and someone says, I'll buy it from the guy who canceled it, it's literally like, this thing doesn't run. My car doesn't run anymore. I don't want it. Haul it away for its junk value.
Yep.
But then the guy goes, spark plugs, and just sticks, and then it runs. And now it's so.
It's happened to several shows, right? They've done.
Correct.
But so here's 2 things, and I'll let Danny decide whether they're necessarily good or bad in his opinion. 2 things that are driving this. I think one of them is a good marketing idea, and it's worked so far that I don't know that necessarily will continue. And that obviously YouTube, like Facebook, has been around a long time, right? Yeah. And garnering the attention of younger people, right? Generations is always for any business. Marketing to younger and younger generations gets more and more difficult the older of a company you are, right? YouTube has one of those. Obviously, it's came out here recently with YouTube Shorts.
Right.
Now, again, it's not always translated into new customers or new eyeballs, but in this case, it has. That obviously has trended into this increase in ads and then increase in ad revenue, right?
Right.
So far as the numbers are concerned, this is the first quarter since they've added YouTube Shorts that they've actually seen a first-time creator of that demographic actually double. So that's in it. That can be a good thing. Again, I don't know how sustainable that is,
Growth
right?
is.
And then the other part of that I say is I don't know if this is again sustainable or a new thing, but apparently in the last Apple update, if you have an iPhone that you use, Apple iPads or whatever, in the latest update, whether you know it or not, you are required as part of the Apple update to opt in for their modest tracking feature that goes directly to Alphabet, that Alphabet then in turn uses to give you more specific ads on your Apple device, which leads to higher revenue from the same ad. Does that make sense? So if you have an Apple product, which 30% of the world does, 70% uses Android, 30% uses Apple.
Like us.
Right. So if you use an Apple product, whether you know it or not, you were opted in to share modest, whatever modest is in
Whatever
quotes
that
legally,
means.
modest amounts of data with YouTube and Alphabet as in general, that they then in turn to get a higher price for the ads that you see on your Apple device.
Right.
So again, whether that's good or bad, I'll leave it to you. But you add these two things together and all of a sudden you start seeing how them making more money for the quarter, they've made a couple of really strategic decisions.
And listen, I think I didn't even consider YouTube Shorts because I don't get ads on anything. So I didn't realize that they were running ad. Makes perfect sense now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
now,
money
let me ask you
money.
this. Considering that you're the market in this explainer, or you're the explainer in this market explainer, are there any Shorts native content makers, content creators?
Not of any big ones that I've seen or read about. And
it's all
again,
just reposts from
takes,
TikTok
right?
and Reels. Yes.
Well, but it's not even. Some of it is repost from TikTok. Some of it is TikTok generated videos that are repurposed onto YouTube, right?
Yep.
Which is not exactly a repost, but it's the same, right?
Right. Same concept.
I've thought about it because I make all of our TikTok comment for Market Explainer. I've thought about taking a lot of our old TikTok videos and just uploading them as YouTube Shorts. But because it's very similar in size and angle and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so I have not yet read about or come across like your TikTok, right? Like Call Me Chris for TikTok or any of these, right? The Bearded Wonder or any of these other...
I finally know who Call Me Chris is, by the way.
But that's my point is I know about all of these TikTok people, right? That are
creators.
I have yet to read a single article written about a specific, hey, this is YouTube short creator or whatever. They're all been repurposed. Same thing for what is it? What's the other one that they tried to jump to? No, Reels? they all tried to. I'll remember
Instagram Reels.
Anyway, it's a TikTok like, but it's not from China.
The American one that ended up being kind of a scam.
I don't remember what it's, but a lot of TikTokers tried to jump to it because they were unhappy with TikTok, and it just hasn't created that same wave, right? So everybody still, all those creators still post on TikTok, right?
Triller.
Yeah. So exactly. So when you add up all of this stuff and you put it all into what we're talking about here about YouTube and stuff like that, I mean, YouTube, as far as Alphabet, right? As far as the Alphabet Corporation or whatever, is still dwarfing Netflix as a whole, right? I mean, when you add in all the cloud businesses and all this stuff, I mean, you're talking about Alphabet literally this past quarter with all of these revenue data coming out has shown a profit of $27.99 per share on the market. It's an insane amount of money that this company, and then to kind of tail it back into what we were talking about last week, when you're creating that kind of revenue, right, which is, somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, $15-16 billion a quarter is what Alphabet is bringing in, right? That's profit. By the way, that's not what it's profit. You can see why the story we talked about last week about Meta, which is now, what I mean, or whatever, wanting to spend $10 billion in a
Yes.
quarter, right, for the
Right.
remainder of this year for a new product.
Right.
Well, you've got companies like Alphabet, Meta, and stuff
Yeah.
making $15 billion in profit a quarter. Okay, so I'll sacrifice my profit. I'm telling you up front that my profit is going to be down by 67% next quarter.
Yeah. Listen, let's just be honest with ourselves here. None of these numbers, they're real, but they're real like plastic is real. It's all make believe. Money's fake. It's not real. It's all monopoly money. But nonetheless, I included this story simply because we are podcasters first, but in a roundabout way, we're YouTubers. And
Yep.
I've been fascinated by the YouTube platform because there really hasn't been a competitor. And there's all of these kind of video sharing platforms that pop up. We're actually working on getting on Rumble right now. It's just one of those things where it's just I'm going to add another plate, another
that should
plate
go
to
over
spin.
really well with some of our content. That's all I'm saying. But go ahead.
That's why we're going there, though, right?
Right.
Is we're there to I am here to do middle fingers to everybody, and I'm going there to do middle fingers to them.
That's right.
So-
You just want to create waves wherever you go, and
That's the goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is a good topic for people that are obviously on this kind of platform.
Yeah.
Whether if you're watching the video or even if you're podcasting in general, this is important.
And the other thing to note for YouTube creators is how is your revenue looking? If their revenue is up, is your revenue up? Because I know a lot of creators are in a situation where they YouTube Premium original content had a show. I forget what it was called off the top of my head, but it was of a teenage boy going around doing some pretty violent things. At the same time, YouTube was striking content for extremely modest, like not crazy stuff. And a lot of people were losing on revenue. They're unmonetizable because of their style of content, but they're still getting ads run against them. They're not their content isn't showing up ad free.
No,
They just can't get any of the ad revenue. So I think there continues to be frustration on the side of creators. And, we're not YouTube content creators in a native sense. We're podcasters.
right.
We just happen to deliver the video of our podcast on YouTube because it's the most sensible place to do it for the moment. But what I'm trying to get at is when there's enough creators that have enough frustration, there will come a time when a competitor emerges. And when you start throwing out crazy numbers like this, venture-backed startups will start emerging to compete with YouTube. And the content creator first video delivery platform. And like I mentioned with Rumble, like Glenn Greenwald, who's not some right-wing conservative,
Yeah.
he's a lefty. He's on Rumble.
Right, but you're talking about there's going to be a decent amount of people that may listen to this podcast that may not even know that Rumble exists. And that's
Correct.
the thing, because you're talking about YouTube and Rumble essentially do the same thing, right?
Correct.
Do exactly the same thing. Same features, whatever, just two different websites. But when people go to Google and they type in, I'm about to watch a video, they type in YouTube.
Right.
This was the argument against .coms when you got .orgs and all these other dot whatever. Nobody's typing
TLDs.
in whatever, it's .com.
Yeah.
It's their automatic at this point. So how do you create a similar, right, and then get the people to those platforms? It's not just the artist. Joe Rogan has shown that on, you know what I mean? Spotify, that his the amount of people that followed him is not 100%.
Right.
Right? There's still a large chunk of them that go and watch the clips on YouTube or whatever. So that becomes the problem. YouTube has either got to change or die in that fashion.
Right.
I think, look, capitalism wins all in the end.
Yes.
When there's going to be a time in probably the not so distant future that as revenue has created for YouTube and Google by those ads, and a certain number of your very popular shows on the platform realize that, okay, Google's revenue is up by 50%. My content that's getting the same number of views as I was a year ago, my raise wasn't 50%. Right? On their ad revenue, it was maybe modestly 3% or 5% or whatever it may be, right? In growth, there's going to be a reckoning, and there always is in capitalism, right?
Yeah, of course. And in markets, there's always going to be, and listen, we're seeing the emergence of brand deals where companies are going, yeah, we don't care. Yep, somebody gets accused of something, yeah, whatever. Like they're coming to a point where, like, there was a famous YouTuber who's accused of something, even right now, there's Dave Portnoy getting accused of things, and it doesn't look like it's slowing anything down.
They're buying your audience, your eyes, not your ethics. And that's where, again, capitalism comes in. And we all, again, perfect world, people wouldn't hire bad people. But the fact is, there are people on YouTube and every other platform, social media platform, that are saying god-awful things and maybe lying or accurate or whatever.
Some of which I agree with.
But the point is whatever, if they have enough of an audience as a company, as a capitalist company, I have zero problems with a company buying those eyeballs. Because they're not buying, they're buying that. They're not buying the ethics, right?
Correct.
I mean,
totally.
All these different people out there that we could list several of them that are horrible people. But if they have a big enough audience, there are people that will advertise on their channel. They will advertise for their whatever, and that's just the point. So, YouTube as a company is going to continue to try and grow that. I think that's one of the things, one of the hurdles they've had with like their YouTube Shorts or some of the other products they've come along with is. Again, I think YouTube is still not completely the Wild West like it used to be 10 years ago.
Which I miss. I miss the Wild West, man.
But it still pretty much is. There are a lot of channels that figure out ways to bypass certain rules in certain ways. They actually acknowledged here recently that they are going to demonetize certain videos that are made by certain age groups meant for younger age groups, right, and that kind of stuff. So all of this is an ever-changing environment of trying to keep advertisers happy.
But at the same time, advertisers, they will make a stink over someone talked about El Tecate or whatever.
But that's their customer. You are not their customer.
Correct, but let me just point this out. Whenever there's a breaking story, you go watch CNN. They're taking, or Fox or whomever, they're taking plenty of ad breaks. So, these big companies have no problem advertising on platforms like CNN. But when it comes to YouTube, they know that they can play they can play the social justice angle and say, "Oh, how dare anybody monetize that content?"
Well, because it's a win-win for them because they get to play I can get out of my contract I may or may not have had with you because of the social acceptability clause that's in everybody's contract, right? So I can use this as an advantage to not pay you in some like NFL players categories or whatever. I can not pay you the millions of dollars that I may have owed you, and I get to look like the good guy in it. So I get to back out of a contract, and I get to look like the good guy while I'm doing it, playing the moral high ground. So it's a win-win for them. Even if, though, by the way, for example, in most sports, whether it's NBA, NFL, or whatever, most of those advertisers that fire people that are under the heat ultimately get back into business with them eventually.
Right.
Which nobody tracks that. Nobody goes, hey, wait a minute. Nike dropped this guy, but 6 months later he's got another Nike deal, but it's just for half of what it was.
Right. That's all.
Right.
So they use it's just interesting to watch mega corporations use social justice as a contract negotiating tactic. That's all.
Well, exactly. I mean, you're talking. So again, and this is a company like YouTube, in this case, Alphabet, right? Google and all of this kind of stuff that is playing that same game, right? They're increasing their ad revenue by, and not necessarily increasing at the same rate what their revenue sharing.
And that to me was the essence of the story as we're closing this out, was one of the ways they're not talking about how they raised revenue was through demonetizing, decreasing ad rates by basically shucking and jiving the creators out of revenue, because what they did was they turned themselves into the ubiquitous place to share video content.
Mm-hmm.
The only place to go to share video content if you want it on your phone. If you want to reach the ultimate audience, where do you go? YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And they change the algorithm. They make it so that it's harder for creators to build an audience. They make it harder for creators to make money. And they say, look at what we did. We increased our revenue.
Wait until that email comes out, like the Facebook out or whatever, where that email that says, like an insurance company denies a certain amount of claims because they get to keep the money for an extra 30 days, even though they should pay them. And
Right.
you know what I mean? Yada, yada. Think about that from Alphabet standpoint. If I demonetize a certain number percentage of videos on these given times, on these certain levels, it automatically adds a certain dollar amount to their pocketbook.
Right. So they just do that. Yeah, I'm sure they do anyway.
You know what I'm saying?
We're presuming that they do because we can't know.
If you're an auditor for Alphabet, I wonder how much is that in the handbook of, here's what you're going to do. Here's part of your rates. You've got to demonetize a certain percentage of these videos for this reason, on this time frame, on this whatever. And if you don't, I'm just saying there's a bean counter that works at Alphabet that has this calculation down.
Of course.
Again, that's my conspiracy theory. I don't know that. I'm just saying that if they don't, they should.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I'm saying. All right, what do we got next, Danny?